ISIS brutality. Another American is beheaded by Islamic State terrorists. Deadly virus. A surgeon is the second Ebola victim to die on American soil. Papal first. The Pope confirms plans for his first visit to the United States. And eye in the sky. Americans living near the border oppose the use of surveillance drones. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, November 17th, 2014. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The Islamic State has beheaded another American. Today, the victim's family is speaking out. Jason Calvi has more.
We were informed that our beloved son, Abdul Rahman, no longer walks this earth.
Parents Ed and Paula Kassig mourn their son, an Iraq vet turned aid worker.
We each get one life, and that's it. You get one shot at this.
After serving in war, the 26-year-old founded a charity to help victims of Syria's civil war. But his work was cut short more than a year ago when he was kidnapped. His family says he converted to Islam in captivity, taking on the name Abdul Rahman. ISIS released this video over the weekend, which doesn't show Kassig's murder, but includes images of his severed head. President Obama called it an act of pure evil. And today, Secretary of State John Kerry says the violence won't stop the U.S. from fighting the group also called ISIL.
ISIL's leaders assumed that the world would be too intimidated to oppose them. Well, let us be clear. We are not intimidated.
Since August, the Islamic State has beheaded 5 Westerners. In the previous 4 videos, ISIS showed another Westerner who would be next to die. But while the terror group showed the depths of their cruelty on tape, other videos show the way Kassig wanted to live his life, working to help others.
There's this impression, this belief that there is no hope, That's when it's more important than ever that we come in against all odds and try to do something.
And his family is planning a Muslim-Christian memorial service. ISIS is holding at least 2 other Westerners, a 26-year-old American woman and a British photojournalist. The new Islamic State video also shows the beheadings of more than a dozen Syrian soldiers. And today, a French official and a Welsh father say 2 of the militants in the video look like Europeans they know. Brian?
Thank you, Jason Calvi. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Missouri's governor is declaring a state of emergency before a grand jury makes its decision in the Michael Brown case. There is no indication when an announcement might come, but Governor Jay Nixon has activated the National Guard as a precaution. The grand jury is reviewing whether Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson should be charged in the August shooting death of Brown. Several days of rioting followed Brown's death, fueled by the fact that the 18-year-old was black and the officer was white. The Ebola virus has claimed a second life here in the U.S. A Nebraska hospital confirms a doctor being treated in Omaha for Ebola died early this morning. Wyatt Goolsby is here now with more.
Brian, today doctors at the University of Nebraska Medical Center say despite their best efforts, they were not able to save Dr. Martin Salia. Salia was working at a hospital in his native Sierra Leone this weekend before he became sick and was flown to the U.S. in critical condition. Despite round-the-clock treatment, hospital officials say Dr. Salia could not recover from advanced symptoms of Ebola.
He had no kidney function. He was working extremely hard to breathe, and he was unresponsive.
The 44-year-old doctor was a legal resident of the U.S., but decided to go back to his native Sierra Leone to work at a Christian hospital as a surgeon. He worked here at the Kissy United Methodist Hospital in Freetown.
Why did I decide to choose this job? I firmly believe God wanted me to do it. And I knew deep within myself, there was just something inside of me that the people of this part of Freetown needed help.
The Methodist Hospital serves one of the poorest areas in Sierra Leone's capital. Throughout his time in West Africa, Salia said it was important for him to listen to God.
I'm confident that I just need to lean on Him, trust Him for whatever comes in, because He sent me here, and that's my passion.
The only other person to die from Ebola in the U.S. is Thomas Eric Duncan. That was back in October in Dallas. More than 5,000 people have died of Ebola, most of them in West Africa. Brian.
Thank you, Wyatt. What a powerful witness from that doctor. Well, after months of speculation, Pope Francis confirms he will travel to the U.S. next year.
In questo contesto mi piace confermare che a Dio piacendo.
The Holy Father speaking today saying he will come to Philadelphia for next September's World Meeting of Families. Philadelphia's mayor says he is overjoyed with enthusiasm about this announcement.
We are deeply honored that Pope Francis, the Holy Father, who is now, in fact, one of the world's most transformative leaders, is coming to the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, the city of families.
Mayor Nutter says next year's meeting will be the largest event in that city's modern history. It also marks Pope Francis's first trip to the United States. Vatican officials have already toured Philadelphia. Pope Francis may also visit New York City and Washington, D.C. at the invitation of the President and Congress. For now, though, the focus is on Philly and the World Meeting of Families. You might recall St. John Paul II was the first pope to visit Philadelphia. That was in 1979. Archbishop Charles Chaput will host the Holy Father in his archdiocese. He expresses his joy in a conversation with our Alan Holdren in Rome.
So Archbishop, Pope Francis confirmed this morning that he will be going to Philadelphia in 2015 for the World Meeting of Families. What does this mean to have him on board?
Well, we've known for a long time that he personally planned on coming, but for it to become a public announcement is really quite extraordinary, because what that's going to do is probably double the energy that we already have for preparing for the gathering. I think for most people, the Pope's visit is an essential part of it. I mean, that's maybe 90% of the enthusiasm to bring Pope Francis to the United States. So the fact that he publicly announced this would be really good for us, both in terms of generating enthusiasm about people coming, but also to get everyone in the city and the county and the state on board in preparation for this big event. So we're grateful. We're very grateful to the Holy Father for announcing it so early.
And it will be important to the nation as well. Well,
to the world. It's it's a world meeting of the family, so we don't expect only people from the county and the city and the state, but we expect people from all continents, 5 continents. We have speakers from all 5 continents speaking at this gathering. We expect maybe more than 1 million people for the events that the Pope will celebrate. So it's going to be quite an experience for all of us.
And what message would you think that Americans need right now from Pope Francis?
Well, he always brings joy and optimism wherever he goes. So I think that everyone today in today's world, with there's so much conflict and there's so much discouragement, to be encouraged by someone of his stature to talk about the importance of world peace and cooperation. But also, family life, as we have traditionally understood it, is confused in people's minds today. And so to have the Holy Father come and talk about what we understand to be the family from a Catholic perspective would be a wonderful thing. Our perspective on family life is shared by most people in the world. All of us understand that family is at the center of who we are. It's what formed us, and it's what we long for in the deepest kind of way. And for the Pope to articulate that in ways that bring everybody else on board with enthusiasm is a wonderful thing.
And he won't just be speaking to Catholics. Pope Francis seems to have a borderless quality. How do you think the response will be from non-Catholics in the United States?
Well, already there's great enthusiasm. I can't believe the amount of cooperation we're getting from state and city officials, and not all of them are Catholic. And in fact, some of our most generous financial contributors towards the event are members of the Jewish community. So it's just really extraordinary already what his personal presence means in terms of this celebration.
Archbishop Chaput from Philadelphia, he's really not that short, it's just that Alan is just really tall. Pope Francis affirms traditional marriage, saying children have the right to grow up with a mother and a father. He made the remarks at an interreligious conference on the complementarity of men and women in marriage at the Vatican this week. The meeting brings together experts from diverse religious traditions who see a need to support marriage.
We thought it would be good if we came together across the faiths, across the world, to say this is a marriage, this is an institution that needs our support and deserves it for the sake of future generations.
The conference was organized by the Vatican's Doctrine Office. Pope Francis received a standing ovation when he addressed that group today. Cardinal Francis George has celebrated his final public mass as the leader of Chicago's 2 million Catholics. Suffering now from cancer, Cardinal George is retiring, turning the job over to Bishop Blaise Cupich. Bishop Cupich comes from Spokane, Washington, to lead the Chicago Archdiocese. The transition actually begins tonight. He will symbolically knock on the door of Holy Name Cathedral and will be welcomed inside to greet civic leaders and envoys from other churches. He plans to live in the cathedral rectory rather than the Archbishop's mansion. Cupich is the first major appointment by Pope Francis for the Church in the United States. You'll see live coverage of the installation Mass from Holy Name Cathedral tomorrow starting at 3 p.m. Eastern here on EWTN. Dr. Matthew Bunson is a papal historian, senior fellow at the St. Paul Center for Biblical Theology, just back from the Holy Land, I might add. You know, some are comparing Bishop Cupich with Pope Francis. How do they compare?
Quite favorably, actually. We see in the appointment of now Archbishop-elect Cupich many of the characteristics that Pope Francis wants and is looking for pastors, for shepherds here in the United States. Think, for example, of his decision not to live in the Archbishop's residence, but to reside in the rectory of the cathedral. A similar thing that he did when he was bishop in Spokane. Somebody who is intensely pastoral, who's orthodox, but is seen as non-ideological. Somebody who really wants to make the Church's pastoral care, bringing God's loving mercy to people, really the centerpiece of his time as bishop. And those are all characteristics of what we've seen with Pope Francis.
Is there anything about this man that we might be missing, something that you might know about?
Archbishop Cupich?
Yes.
Yes, he's an expert in liturgy. He has a doctorate in liturgical theology.
Did not know that.
And his dissertation was on Advent in the Roman tradition. So he's somebody I think we can look forward to having a pretty good Advent season as Archbishop in Chicago.
Absolutely. He defends the Church's moral positions, yet his focus seems to be on outreach, especially to the poor. How does that play out in Chicago?
I think in Chicago it will be very well received. I mean, we're talking about a very large city. It's a gregarious kind of an archdiocese. Historically, bishops have struggled sometimes with the presbyterate. It's a very active kind of an archdiocese. But it also has a host of social problems, of economic problems. And the outreach of someone like Archbishop Cupich, intensely pastoral, to say that phrase again, much like Francis, I think is something that will resonate well, not just with Catholics, but with the community at large. And again, he is not a message from Pope Francis to the American hierarchy. But he is a pastor. He's somebody who wants to serve as their bishop. That's what Francis wants in that post.
I want to talk to you more about the Pope coming to the United States, as well as his agreement to put showers into the restrooms there in St. Peter's Square.
Yeah.
So if you'll come back with us a little later on, we'll tackle those.
Looking forward to it.
Dr. Matthew Bunson, thanks for being with us. Well, coming up, immigration is an issue on the minds of both the Pope and the President. On Monday, November 17th, thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. More than 1,000 students flood Capitol Hill today, remembering 6 Jesuit priests who died fighting for human rights in El Salvador. The students spread out in groups advocating for immigration reform and human rights in Central America. The Jesuits were killed on a San Salvador college campus in 1989. One of the activists explains why the students came to Capitol Hill today.
We're here to continue to live out the legacy of the Jesuit martyrs of El Salvador, killed 25 years ago. The majority of these folks are young people. They're people who were not even alive when the Jesuits were killed, but they feel called to act on this legacy.
The students who gathered on this rainy Monday represent more than 90 Catholic high schools and universities nationwide. Senate Democrats are urging the president to act on immigration, saying he should do so through executive action. 6 lawmakers, including current Majority Leader Harry Reid, sent a letter to the White House saying as much today. They argue executive action for illegal immigrants who have strong ties to the country would help boost the nation's economy. The White House is expected to take action this week, possibly affecting 5 million immigrants. Republicans disagree with any plans that are not passed by Congress. They are looking at possible ways to block White House measures. Pope Francis says sharp tensions in European cities over immigrants could worsen without constructive dialogue. He's suggesting local churches could host meetings for all sides to listen and make plans together. His remarks Sunday in St. Peter's Square come days after an outbreak of violence against refugees in working-class Rome neighborhoods. Riot police were sent in after several days of anti-immigrant tensions. The Pope thinks these meetings may help, quote, overcome every suspicion and prejudice. 3 sisters serving on the border at Brownsville, Texas, are honored for their work during the immigration crisis. Sister Carolyn Jackson, Sister Emily Kosib, and Sister Fatima Santiago are missionary sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. They received the National 2014 Lumen Christi Award, Latin for Light of Christ. Ashley Feasley is an immigration policy advisor at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Do you think Pope Francis is more outspoken than previous popes on immigration?
I think that Pope Francis has a strong affinity for migrants, and I think some of this comes from his work and also the fact that he is the first pope from Latin America and his affinity for the Latino community.
Pope Francis, of course, speaking out this weekend on immigration. President Obama now likely to take action, executive action, on immigration reform. Do you think the bishops support that?
The bishops are supporting executive action. I think that they feel that it's important to end family separation and deportations, but they also urge for further work with Congress to make a more permanent legislative solution to our broken immigration system.
Catholics are free on this issue to disagree on the approach to it. What exactly would the bishops like to see in this area?
I think that it's important to recognize that the bishops would like to see families be able to stay together. They see it in their communities, the separation that it's caused. And it's important to recognize that executive action is a means to end that temporarily. But of course, a larger legislative solution with Congress is ultimately the best solution to fixing this broken immigration system.
How did the bishops address this issue at their General Assembly in Baltimore last week?
Bishop Elizondo, who is the committee head of the Committee on Migration, spoke about this in the meeting and talked about the need to alleviate some of the suffering that some of the community is facing, and the need and urge to support immigration reform and end the suffering of family separation.
So Catholics are called to welcome strangers. Jesus did that. But also we're supposed to follow the law. How do we do both?
I think it's important to remember that these individuals who are living here, they want to get right with the law. They are raising families here. They're contributing to their communities. They're going to church. They're paying taxes. And we as Catholics, we need to welcome them, but we also need to advocate Congress for reform to this broken immigration system and try and live within that paradigm and follow the law.
So many of us American Catholics are the descendants of immigrants. I think it's important to remember that as well. Ashley Feasley, Immigration Policy Advisor at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, the U.S. Border Patrol's latest security measure is an invasion of privacy, according to some American citizens. More from Catherine Zeltner tonight.
Tucked away in piles of rocks and other secret spots, Jim Chilton's hidden cameras spread across his Arizona ranch have captured dozens of people illegally crossing his property from Mexico.
This is the drug channel that the cartel leaves mostly for cartel drug movement.
And Chilton isn't the only one quietly watching the border. The government has started using drones to monitor the roughly 2,000-mile boundary with Mexico.
The ability to have the UAS respond quickly and start searching that area and putting out that electronic fence, for lack of a better term, looking for this group of people who are going to do harm to our country is critical.
In the last few years, the drones have flown thousands of missions. But the extra eyes in the sky aren't sitting well with everyone.
There's no reason to watch me, or my family, or my dad.
John Ladd's family has raised cattle in the border town of Naco, Arizona for more than 100 years. He already has several Border Patrol surveillance cameras on his property and calls the drones another invasion of privacy.
And I really don't like that. And part of the immigration issue is we live out in the country and we don't have any privacy because we either have illegals, dopers, or Border Patrol.
Lothar Eckert, who runs the drone surveillance program, says their mission is clear.
I don't have this requirement to go read people's license plates. I don't have this requirement to X-ray through somebody's house. I mean, that's not what my job is to defend the border of the United States.
Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Up next, disturbing numbers show more American children are homeless, especially in California. Grateful you're joining us for EWTN News Nightly on this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. The numbers are disturbing from a new report on child homelessness. They show a surge to 1 in every 30 children living in cars, shelters, or even worse. The National Center on Family Homelessness calculates an 8% increase in child homelessness from 2012 to 2013. The number rose in 31 states. The center ranked U.S. states on the extent of the problem and how well they're responding to it. Alabama, Mississippi, and California have the worst records. California alone, where 1/8 of the U.S. population lives, accounts for 1/5 of homeless children in the United States. Construction work on showers for the homeless began today in St. Peter's Square. The showers and public restrooms at Bernini's Colonnade should be completed in a few months. The homeless will be able to clean up and change clothes in the shadow of the Apostolic Palace. The Pope's almsgiver, Monsignor Konrad Krajewski, recently suggested building the showers. At his invitation, about 10 other Rome parishes have already opened showers for the homeless. Vatican expert and author of the Pope Encyclopedia, Dr. Matthew Bunson, back with us today. And this interest in the poor on the part of Pope Francis, does that go back to his days as the Archbishop of Buenos Aires?
Oh, it does. It goes all the way back to his youth when he actually helped care for the poor and the homeless in the streets of Argentina and Buenos Aires. But definitely, when he was the Archbishop in Buenos Aires, he would regularly go out at night and meet and feed the homeless and help them get shelter when it was cold. So when he became Pope, when he reappointed a new apostolic almoner, in other words, this is a person who's in charge of distributing papal charity.
They call him Father Conrad.
They do.
Yes.
He specifically said to him, sell your desk, because I don't want you behind a desk. I want you out on the streets. He said, don't wait for the poor to come to you, find them. And Archbishop Krajewski has been doing a remarkable job of it. In fact, his work has been so effective with the Swiss Guard at night that the rumors started, if you remember last year, that Francis was actually sneaking out at night to feed and care for the homeless.
So he's coming to America. He's finally confirmed it. He, of course, follows in the footsteps of Paul VI, John Paul II, Pope Benedict. They all came here.
Yes.
How is this visit different?
It's different because it's Francis. If we're looking for sort of setting the tone for what we can expect, there's going to be a huge media frenzy next year in Philadelphia and presumably in New York and possibly Washington. I would compare Francis's visit next year less to Benedict's visit here when he was Pope, as much as John Paul II's first visit in 1979, where the world was captivated by this new Polish Pope.
That's where I first met him. In Chicago.
A memorable event in the history of American Catholicism. I think this one will be too.
All right, and some of the people, some people in media really look like they're selectively reporting on Francis. What do you think about that?
I would tend to agree. I think you and I have talked in the past about this media projection, that they're projecting onto Francis what they want. They look for conflict. We saw that during the Synod. Francis is very unusual. He's sometimes hard to understand from a media standpoint because what he does is seemingly so extemporaneous. And yet Francis has a very clear, authentic plan for how he's presenting the teachings of the Church. The media sometimes doesn't get it, but sometimes the media does get it, and they're trying to move public opinion, to sort of move the Church in the direction that they want, rather than the authentic direction that Francis is taking us. So yes, I would agree that I think there is some effort at manipulation and misrepresentation about Francis.
I think he can hold up to it, though.
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Dr. Matthew Bunson, next time you're on, we'll talk more about your trip to the Holy Land.
Looking forward to it. God bless.
Appreciate the gifts you brought back. Well, until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch anytime you like on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. We leave you tonight with these special moments from the last public mass of Cardinal Francis George as Archbishop of Chicago. These photos were taken by the Catholic New World, that's the Archdiocese of Chicago's newspaper. Good night and God bless you.